There are sounds that shouldn't exist after midnight. Laments that rise from the darkness, slithering through the shadows of trees, creeping along the banks of forgotten rivers. A woman's cry that some hear only once in their lives, and never forget. They say she travels all over Latin America from north to south, with the same pain, the same insatiable thirst. They say her white dress floats on the water without getting wet. They say her hands are as cold as death itself. They say he's looking for something he lost centuries ago. And that he will never stop searching. This is the story of La Llorona. But it's not just one story. It's an echo multiplied in hundreds of towns, on thousands of nights, in testimonies that repeat themselves with unsettling variations. Every country has its version. Every region, its truth. And they all agree on one thing: when you hear her, it's too late to run. To find the origin, we must return to a place that no longer exists. Mexico-Tenochtitlan. The year 1521. The waters of the canals reflected the glow of a dying city. The Spanish had besieged the Mexica capital, and the nights brought more than just hunger and death. According to chroniclers of the time, something began to be heard in the empty streets. A woman's lament echoed through the city, from the canals to the ceremonial plazas. Years later, Fray Bernardino de Sahagun collected the testimonies of those who heard it. A woman came weeping and crying out loudly. And she said, "Oh, my children! Where shall I take you so that you may escape from such a terrible destruction?" The Mexica elders claimed to have seen her floating on the dark waters, dressed in white, her long, disheveled hair falling over her face. Some said it was Siguanaba, the mother goddess, weeping for the fate of her people. Others murmured that it was an omen, a warning from the gods about the inevitable fall. But there were those who told a different story. Long before the conquest, an older legend circulated in the villages near Lake Texcoco. It told of a beautiful woman who had loved a noble warrior. From this love, 3 children were born. But the warrior, bound by his lineage, had to marry a woman of his own social class. When she found out, something broke inside her. One full moon night, she took her 3 children by the hand and walked with them to the edge of the lake. The water was still and dark, like a mirror reflecting the stars. The children laughed. They didn't know what was to come. They say she began to sing a lullaby. Soft, sweet, hypnotic. And as she sang, she entered the water with them. First up to her knees. Then up to her waist. The children stopped laughing. When the water reached their necks, she pushed them down. One by one. Her small hands thrashed on the surface. Her screams were drowned out by bubbles. And when all was silent, when the bodies floated lifeless in the moonlight, she understood the magnitude of what she had done. The scream that rose from her throat, they say, could be heard throughout the region. She walked into the lake, searching for them, calling out to them. The water swallowed her too. But her spirit found no rest. From that night on, fishermen who set out before dawn began to hear a cry in the fog. A white figure floated on the water, arms outstretched, searching for something it would never find. As the centuries passed, the weeping spread. As if the original tragedy had opened a door that could no longer be closed. From Mexico, the legend traveled south and north, mutating, adapting, acquiring new names and faces. But its core remained intact: a woman who lost her children, a river, an eternal cry. In each country, the details changed. But the terror it provoked was always the same. Guatemala, the weeping woman of Lake Amatitlán. In Guatemala, particularly in the vicinity of Lake Amatitlán, the elders tell a blood-curdling version. They say that the Guatemalan Weeping Woman doesn't just look for her children. She seeks to replace them. According to the local version, Maria was an exceptionally beautiful indigenous woman who fell in love with a wealthy Spaniard. He secretly courted her for months, promised marriage, and swore eternal love. 2 children were born from this relationship. But when she asked him to keep his promise, he laughed in her face. "I would never marry an Indian woman," he told her. That same night, Maria took her children to the lake. The water was cold, almost freezing. She submerged them one by one, watching their faces as life drained from their small bodies. Then she herself waded into the depths. But his death did not bring peace. The fishermen on the lake began reporting disturbing encounters. A soaking wet woman, her dress clinging to her body, would emerge from the water and ask them, "Have you seen my children?" When they answered no, she moved closer. Her eyes, they said, were completely black. Empty. And her voice changed, becoming deep, guttural. "Then you will be my son." Several men claimed to have narrowly escaped. One of them, a fisherman named Mateo, recounted in 1987 what happened to him one October morning. "I was hauling in the nets when I saw her. I thought she was someone who needed help. I approached in the boat. When I got close, I saw that she wasn't touching the water. She was floating on it. She asked me about her children. I told her I didn't know anything. Then she stretched out her hands toward me. They were the hands of a corpse, swollen and bluish. I started rowing backward, but the boat wouldn't move. She was getting closer and closer. I began to pray. And when I mentioned God's name, she screamed. It was a scream that seemed to come from 1,000 throats. And she disappeared beneath the water. Mateo never went fishing at night again. El Salvador, La Siguanaba and La Llorona fused. In El Salvador, the figure of La Llorona is mixed with another entity, La Siguanaba, a beautiful woman who transforms into something monstrous. According to stories told in rural areas, the Salvadoran La Llorona first appears as a beautiful woman washing clothes by the river. Her long, black hair shines in the moonlight. She sings softly as she washes. Men who see her from a distance feel an irresistible attraction. But when they get close, everything changes. The woman stops singing. She rises slowly. And when she turns around, her face is no longer human. Her skin is rotten, her eyes are empty sockets, and worms emerge from her mouth. Her weeping is no longer soft, it is a heart-rending howl that paralyzes anyone who hears it. Those who manage to escape say she pursues them. Not running, but floating inches above the ground, getting faster and faster, no matter how fast they run. Some claim they can only escape if they throw themselves to the ground and pray, or if they find a cross along the way. In 1994, a group of young people from Santa Ana decided to challenge the legend. They went to the La Canada River one November night, armed with flashlights and cameras. They wanted to prove that La Llorona didn't exist. They never all returned. 3 of the 5 young people appeared at dawn in different parts of the village, miles apart. They were soaked, even though it hadn't rained. They were trembling uncontrollably. None of the 3 could speak for 2 days. When they finally did, their testimonies agreed on the essentials. They had seen the woman by the river. Beautiful, real, tangible. One of them approached her to speak. When she turned around, her face was that of a decomposing corpse. The scream that escaped her lips paralyzed them. After that, they only remember running, feeling something chasing them, and waking up far away. The other 2 young men were never found. Honduras, the dirty land and the nighttime crying. In Honduras, particularly in the mountainous areas, La Llorona has a different name, La Sucia. They say she's a woman with long hair who appears on country roads, always after midnight. Her dress is torn and dirty, as if she'd been crawling through mud. She walks barefoot, leaving muddy footprints that disappear seconds later. The most disturbing thing about La Sucia, according to testimonies, is that she doesn't appear the same to everyone. Some see her as a decrepit old woman. Others as a beautiful young woman. And some see her as something that shouldn't have a form, a dark silhouette with glowing eyes, a massive shadow that crawls. But everyone hears her crying. A merchant from Comayagua named Esteban recounted his encounter in 2003. "I was coming back from a delivery in the capital. It was past 1 in the morning. The road was empty. Suddenly, in the middle of the road, I saw a woman. I braked just in time. I rolled down the window to ask if she needed help. She had her back to me. Her hair was so long it almost touched the ground. I spoke to her. She didn't answer. I spoke louder. Then she began to turn around. very slowly. And as she did, I heard crying. It wasn't coming from her. It was coming from everywhere. From the forest, from the sky, from inside my truck. I accelerated without looking back. In the rearview mirror, I saw her stay on the road. But she wasn't standing. She was floating. And she was looking at me with eyes that weren't eyes. Esteban sold his truck the following week. He claims that every time he drove it, he felt like something was watching him from the back seat. Nicaragua, La Cegua and La Llorona. Nicaragua has its own version, known as La Cegua in some regions, although it is also called La Llorona. Night riders in rural areas know the story well. They say that if you ride alone after midnight, you might meet a beautiful woman on the road. She'll ask you for a ride. If you accept, she'll climb on behind you. At first, everything will seem normal. You'll feel its weight on the horse, its arms lightly around you. Perhaps it will even speak to you in a soft voice. But after a few minutes, the horse will begin to behave strangely. It will become agitated, try to bolt and whinny in fear. And then you will feel his breath on your neck. Cold. Damp. Smelling of wet earth and decay. If you dare to look back, you'll see that she's no longer a woman. Her face will have transformed into that of a decomposing horse, with a hanging jaw, yellow and broken teeth, and white, lifeless eyes. And her cry, which will now be more of a distorted neigh, will follow you even if you manage to dismantle her. A farmer named Rodrigo, from Leon, recounted that one night in 1998 he had this experience. I didn't believe in any of that. But that night everything changed. I saw her by the roadside. She was beautiful. She asked me to take her to the next town. She got on behind me. Everything was fine until my horse started sweating and snorting. Then I felt her fingers on my shoulder. They were cold, hard fingers. I looked back instinctively. And what I saw. My God, what I saw. Her face was. I can't describe it. It was like someone had mixed a woman and a dead animal. I jumped off my horse and ran. I don't know how far I ran. When I got home, it was just getting light. My horse showed up 2 days later, but he was never the same again. He limped, and his eyes, there was something broken in his eyes. Costa Rica, the Weeping Woman of the Virilla River. In Costa Rica, the legend is particularly concentrated in the area around the Virilla River and other bodies of water in the provinces of San Jose and Heredia. The Costa Rican version retains the Mexican essence, a woman who drowned her children out of love for a man who abandoned her. But here, the testimonies are more recent and more detailed. In the 1970s, several families living near the Virilla River reported hearing cries for weeks on end, always between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. The cries were so clear and so close that several people left their homes to investigate. They never found anything. But some claimed to have seen her. A lady named Carmen, who lived in Pavis, told her experience to a local newspaper in 1976. My children couldn't sleep. The crying was so loud it seemed to be coming from our own yard. One night I mustered up my courage and went outside with a lamp. I walked toward the river. And I saw her. She was standing in the water, but it only came up to her ankles, though it should have been up to her waist. She was dressed in white, all white. Her hair covered her face. And she was crying. She was crying in a way I've never heard since. It wasn't human crying. It was as if all the sorrows in the world were pouring from a single throat. I froze. She raised her head, and although I couldn't see her face, I knew she was looking at me. I slowly backed away to the house. I didn't go out at night again for years. Costa Rican paranormal investigators have documented dozens of similar sightings over decades. Many agree on the same details: the white dress, the hair covering the face, the presence by the water, and that unmistakable cry. In 2005, a group of university students decided to spend a night by the river with recording equipment. They wanted to capture evidence of the crying. The recording was never broadcast in its entirety. The students handed the footage over to university authorities, who decided to archive it. But those who saw it claim that a cry can be clearly heard in the recording, increasing in intensity until it becomes a deafening scream. And in the final seconds of the video, they say, a white figure can be seen materializing among the trees. The students refuse to speak publicly about the incident. The weeping continues. It spread south, across borders, adapting to new rivers, new lakes, new tragedies. Each country adds its own pain to the legend. Each testimony adds another layer of terror to a story that seems to have no end. Panama, the Tulivieja. In Panama, La Llorona is known as La Tulivieja, and her story is particularly dark. According to stories from the central provinces, La Tulivieja was an indigenous woman who had a child out of wedlock. Ashamed, she decided to get rid of the baby. One night she took him to the river and left him among the rocks for the current to carry away. But his crime did not go unpunished. As divine punishment, his body began to transform. His skin became covered in mud and moss. His feet turned into animal paws. His face was hidden behind a mass of hair that grew constantly, as if the forest vegetation had taken possession of his body. They say she wanders the riverbanks searching for her son, but also seeking revenge. Especially against unfaithful men and mothers who mistreat their children. The Panamanian testimonies are specific and disturbing. A farmer from Cockle named Alberto recounted in 1989. I was walking home from a party. I'd been drinking, I admit. It was around 3 in the morning. The road runs alongside the Cockle del Norte River. I heard a splash in the water. I thought it was an animal. But then I heard crying. It was like a woman's cry, but also like the howl of a wounded animal. I went to the bank to see. And there she was. She wasn't a complete woman. She was something. She had the shape of a woman, but she was covered in mud and branches. Her hair was so long it dragged on the ground. I couldn't see her face, but I heard her voice. She said, "Come with me. Help me find my son." Her voice was sweet, but there was something wrong with it. Something that told me if I went near her, I'd never come back. I ran. And as I ran, I heard her behind me. Not her footsteps, but the sound of something heavy being dragged across the earth. Alberto claims that for weeks after the encounter, he heard scratching at his front door every night. As if something was trying to get in. Colombia, the weeping woman of many rivers. Colombia, with its geography of countless rivers that cross mountains, valleys, and jungles, has multiple versions of La Llorona. Each region tells its own version, but all maintain the core of the tragedy. In the Andean region, particularly near Bogotá, it is said that La Llorona appears in the streams and small rivers that flow down from the hills. Residents of neighborhoods like La Candelaria and Egipto, on the slopes of Montserrat, claim to have heard her cries for decades. A particularly unsettling version circulates in Cundinamarca. They say that La Llorona doesn't just cry. Sometimes she sings. Lullabies that are beautiful at first, but that gradually distort until they become grotesque. A police officer patrolling the Usaquén area in 1982 officially reported an incident he was never able to explain. It was 2:30 in the morning. I was patrolling alone near the Torca wetland. The area was completely silent. Suddenly, I heard a woman's voice singing. It was a soft, melodic song. I thought someone had drunk too much and was wandering around. I headed toward the sound to offer help. As I got closer, the song began to change. The words became unintelligible. The pitch became higher, more unnatural. When I reached the edge of the wetland, I saw her. A woman's figure floating on the water. No, not walking. Floating. Her dress was white, but it was completely dry. I took out my flashlight and shone it on her. The light passed through her like smoke. She stopped singing. She turned toward me. And although I couldn't see her face clearly, I felt her eyes. I felt like she was watching me from somewhere otherworldly. I backed away. The radio started to crackle. I heard distorted voices coming from it. Children's voices. I ran back to the patrol car. I reported the incident. I was suspended for 3 days for unusual behavior on duty. But I know what I saw. On the Colombian Caribbean coast, the legend takes on a different tone. In Barranquilla and Cartagena, they say that La Llorona appears during tropical storms, when wind and rain lash the coast. The old fishermen told stories of how, on those nights, if you venture near the sea, you can hear her weeping mingled with the roar of the waves. And if you see her, she stands on the water, floating among the waves as if the ocean could not touch her. A fishing family from Santa Marta lost their eldest son at sea in 1995. Weeks later, the father claimed to have seen a woman in white walking on the waves during a nighttime storm. She was watching him from a distance. And although he couldn't hear her voice over the roar of the storm, he knew she was crying. The man went mad 3 months later. Before being hospitalized, he constantly repeated, "She has my son. She took him. And she'll come for the others." Venezuela, La Llorona and La Llorona intertwined. In Venezuela, La Llorona shares space with another equally terrifying entity, La Llorona. And in some regions, both legends have merged to the point of being indistinguishable. The Venezuelan version tells that La Llorona was a woman named Casilda, of extraordinary beauty, who lived in Los Llanos. She was married and had 2 young children. But her jealous and manipulative mother lied to her, telling her that her husband was being unfaithful with another woman. Consumed by jealousy, Casilda waited for her husband to return home one night. Without giving him a chance to explain, she murdered him in his sleep. Then, in a fit of madness, she also killed her 2 children, believing they were the product of infidelity. When her mother arrived home the next day and saw the massacre, she confessed the truth: it had all been a lie. There had been no infidelity. She had made it up out of envy. Casilda, realizing what she had done, went mad. She killed her mother and then ran towards the Orinoco River. She threw herself into the water screaming. Her body was never found. But from that night on, the plainsmen began reporting sightings of a woman wandering along the banks of rivers and lagoons. Dressed entirely in white, with her hair loose down to her waist, she was weeping and calling for her children. What's disturbing about the Venezuelan version is that La Llorona doesn't just appear. She attacks. According to the accounts, if a man sees her and approaches, she transforms. Her beautiful face becomes a skull with hanging flesh, her hands turn into claws, and her weeping transforms into a bestial roar. A cowboy from Apure named Ramon recounted in 1978. "I was herding cattle near the stream. It was getting dark. I heard a soft cry. I thought someone needed help. I got off my horse and walked toward the sound. I saw her by the water, her back to me. I spoke to her. She turned around slowly. At first, she was beautiful. The most beautiful woman I had ever seen. But as I looked at her, her face began to change. Her skin peeled off in pieces. Her eyes sank. Her mouth opened too wide, wider than humanly possible. And she screamed. That scream was not of this world. It paralyzed me. I felt like I was going to faint. My horse whinnied, and that snapped me out of it. I mounted and spurred the animal on with all my might. She came after me. I saw her in the shadows, floating among the trees. I arrived in town screaming. I was sick for 3 weeks. High fever, delirium. The doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. The town healer said she had marked me. He performed a cleansing ritual. I survived. But I never went back to that place. Ecuador, the Weeping Woman of Guayaquil and the mountains. Ecuador has its own versions, mainly divided between the coast and the highlands. In Guayaquil, the city's oldest inhabitants say that La Llorona appears in the marshes and along the Guayas River boardwalk, especially on foggy nights when the river's humidity mixes with the darkness. They say she walks along the boardwalk, always in the same direction, from south to north. Her dress is white but stained with something dark that drips constantly. She leaves a damp trail behind her that disappears in seconds. Security guards working on the boardwalk have reported similar encounters for years. Some refuse to patrol certain sections after midnight. In 2001, a guard named Hector recorded his testimony. "I've been working night security for 15 years. I've seen a lot of strange things. But this was different. It was 3 in the morning. I was doing my usual rounds. The boardwalk was completely empty. Then I saw her walking toward me from a distance. A woman in white. I thought she was someone who had stayed behind after closing time. I went over to tell her the area was closed. But as I got closer, something wasn't right. She was walking strangely. Too softly. Like she wasn't touching the ground. I stopped about 10 meters away. I spoke to her. She didn't answer. She kept walking toward me. I turned on my flashlight and shone it on her. The light passed right through her. She didn't cast a shadow. And then I heard crying. It was coming from her, but also from the river, from the air, from everywhere. It was the cry of a mother who has lost everything. I froze. She walked past me. I felt a chill that went right through my bones. And I heard her voice, very close to my ear, "Help me find them." When I turned around, there was nobody there. I quit the following week. In the Ecuadorian highlands, particularly in the provinces of Imbabura and Chimborazo, La Llorona has different characteristics. Here, it appears in the ravines that descend from the highlands. The farmers who live on the slopes of the volcanoes claim that on very cold nights, when the fog descends from the mountains, its cries can be heard for miles around. A unique feature of the mountain version is that La Llorona is said to never come alone. Some accounts mention that she is accompanied by small shadows that float around her. The spirits of her children, they say, trapped with her for all eternity. An elderly woman from Otavalo named Rosa recounted in 1991. "My grandmother told me that when she was a child, in the 1930s, La Llorona would come down from Mount Imbabura whenever someone in the village was going to die. It was a sign. 2 nights before my great-uncle died, the whole family heard her weeping. It was coming from the ravine. It was so clear that my grandmother and her sisters went out to see. They saw a woman in white walking along the bank. And around her, 3 small figures, like children, also in white. They were floating. My grandmother said that the weeping was the saddest sound she had ever heard. As if all the pain in the world were concentrated in that voice. The next day, my great-uncle fell ill. He died 2 days later." Peru, La Llorona in the Inca Empire. In Peru, the legend is intertwined with pre-Hispanic traditions. Some anthropologists suggest that La Llorona may be related to ancient female water deities who were venerated before the arrival of the Spanish. In Cusco and its surroundings, locals speak of a woman who weeps by the Urubamba River and among the ruins of old colonial haciendas. They say she was an Inca princess who had children with a Spanish conquistador. When he abandoned her to return to Spain, she, humiliated and desperate, drowned her children in the sacred river. But there's something unique about the Peruvian version. They say that if La Llorona calls you by name, you must resist the temptation to answer. Because if you answer, you've accepted her invitation. And she will come for you. A tour guide in Machu Picchu named Carlos had an experience he will never forget. It was 2006. I had finished my last tour of the day and was heading down towards Aguas Calientes. It was already getting dark. The trail was empty. Then I heard my name. Clear, loud. It was a woman's voice. I thought it was another guide calling me. I was about to answer. But something stopped me. An instinct. I kept walking. And then I heard it again. My name. But this time it was coming from the opposite direction. Then to my left. Then to my right. It was impossible. There was no one else on the trail. And then I saw her. She was standing next to one of the old walls. Dressed in white. Her hair covered her face. She raised a hand and gestured for me to come closer. And she called my name again. This time her voice sounded different. Deeper. Echoing. As if it were coming from very far away and very close at the same time. I didn't go closer. I began to pray softly in Quechua, as my grandmother taught me. I lowered my gaze and walked quickly without looking back. I felt her presence following me all the way to the village. That night I couldn't sleep. And for weeks afterward, whenever I was alone, I heard my name whispered on the wind. In the Peruvian Amazon, in Iquitos and the riverside communities, La Llorona takes on even more sinister characteristics. Here, they say she appears during river floods, when the water sweeps everything in its path. The fishermen say that on those nights, when the river turns brown and raging, if you hear a cry mixed with the roar of the water, you must leave immediately. Because it means she is hunting. According to local legends, the Amazonian La Llorona doesn't just search for her children. She seeks to replace them. And if she finds children alone near the river, she calls to them in a sweet voice, imitating their mothers. The trusting children approach and disappear. Several cases of missing children in riverside communities have been attributed to La Llorona. Although authorities report drowning accidents, the families know the truth. A mother from a community near Pucallpa lost her 8-year-old daughter in 1998. The girl had gone to wash clothes in the river with other children. Her friends said they heard someone call the girl's name. She turned around, smiled, and walked toward the water. She went in without hesitation. By the time her friends reacted, she was already underwater. Her body was never found. The mother says that for months after the incident, she heard her daughter's voice calling her from the river every night, asking her to come and get her. Bolivia, the Weeping Woman of the Altiplano. In Bolivia, particularly in the highland regions and near Lake Titicaca, La Llorona has been seen for centuries. The Aymara and Quechua people of the region say that it appears on moonless nights, when the darkness is absolute and the cold cuts through the skin. They say its cries can be heard from miles away, traveling across the waters of the sacred lake. A unique feature of the Bolivian version is that they mention La Llorona sometimes appears with the bodies of her children. She carries them in her arms, bluish, soaked children, their eyes open but lifeless. And she shows them to whomever she encounters, asking, "Are they asleep? Tell me they're just asleep." A merchant from La Paz named Fernando had an encounter near Copacabana in 2003. I was returning from making deliveries in the communities near the lake. It was past midnight. The road was deserted and dark. Only the headlights of my truck illuminated the way. Suddenly, I saw a figure in the middle of the road. I stopped. It was a woman dressed in white, barefoot. She was holding something in her arms. I rolled down the window to ask if she needed help. When I got closer, I saw that she was carrying 2 small children. They were completely soaked. She was gently rocking them, singing to them. She looked directly at me and asked if they were asleep. The children's eyes were open, but they weren't moving. They weren't breathing. I told her I needed medical help, that she should get in the truck. She smiled. But it wasn't a human smile. It was too wide. And her eyes were black. Completely black. I said a prayer my grandmother taught me. And she disappeared. She just vanished. With the children. There was no trace left that she had been there. Only a puddle of water where she had been standing. Chile, La Llorona at the end of the world. In Chile, from the Atacama Desert to Patagonia, there are versions of La Llorona adapted to the country's extreme geography. In the north, in the desert oases, miners tell stories of a woman who weeps on the coldest nights. They say she appears near dry riverbeds and ancient irrigation ditches, searching for water for her children who died of thirst. But it is in the south, in the regions of lakes and native forests, where the legend becomes more intense. In Chiloé, the mythical island, La Llorona is intertwined with other figures of local folklore. The people of Chiloé say she appears on the beaches during storms, walking along the shore, ankle-deep in water, weeping and calling for her children whom the sea has taken. A fisherman from Castro named Manuel recounted in 1995. "My father told me that his grandfather saw her. He was a fisherman like us. One stormy night he had gone out because he desperately needed money. The sea was raging. He shouldn't have gone out. But he did. When he was far from the shore, the storm worsened. The waves were enormous. He thought he was going to die. And then he saw her. She was walking on the waves. On them, not under them. Dressed in white, shining with her own light. She approached the boat. My great-grandfather was paralyzed with fear. She looked at him. And she spoke to him. She told him that she had lost her children at sea. That the sea had taken them from her. And that now she was looking for the souls of others to replace them. She asked him if he wanted to go with her. My great-grandfather prayed. He prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. And she walked away. Weeping. Her weeping was louder than the roar of the storm. He managed to return to land. But he was never the same again. He stopped fishing. And until the day he died, whenever there was a storm, he was nervous. He said he could hear her calling him. Argentina, the weeping woman of the Rio de la Plata. In Argentina, the legend is mainly concentrated in the northern provinces, but there are also versions in Buenos Aires and its surroundings. In the provinces of Salta, Jujuy, and Tucumán, La Llorona appears in the rivers that flow down from the mountains. Locals say her cries can be mistaken for the wind that blows down from the hills, but those who have heard them know the difference. One characteristic of the Argentinian version is that they say La Llorona doesn't just appear. Sometimes she possesses people, especially women who have suffered similar losses. In 1987, in the province of Salta, a woman who had lost her son in an accident began to behave strangely. At night, she would leave her house and walk toward the river. Her family would find her there, crying, calling for her son. But when they spoke to her, she didn't recognize them. Her voice had changed. It was deeper, older. The village priest performed an exorcism. During the ritual, they say, the woman spoke in a language no one recognized. And her voice sounded like multiple people speaking at once. The exorcism lasted 3 hours. In the end, the woman collapsed. When she awoke, she remembered nothing of the past 3 months. Brazil, the Corona and regional variants. Brazil, with its immense geography, has multiple versions of La Llorona, known mainly as a Chorona or a Mulher de Branco. In the northeast, particularly in Bahia and Pernambuco, it blends with Afro-Brazilian traditions. Some associate it with entities from Candomblé and Umbanda, spirits of women who suffered tragedies during slavery. In the Brazilian Amazon region, river dwellers speak of a woman who appears during torrential rains, when the Rio Negro and the Amazon River swell and overflow their banks. They say her weeping blends with the roar of the water, but if you listen closely, you can make out the words she repeats over and over, my children, my children. A fisherman from Manaus named João recounted in 2002. I was fishing at night near the confluence of the rivers. The moon was full. The water was calm. Then I heard crying. Very soft at first. I thought it was an animal. But it grew louder. And more human. I turned around and saw her. She was standing on my boat. On my boat. She hadn't climbed in. She was just there. Dressed in white, soaking wet. Water dripped from her hair. She looked at me. And in that moment I knew she wasn't human. Her eyes were white. Without pupils. She spoke to me in archaic Portuguese. Words I could barely understand. Something about her children. About the river that took them. She held out her hand toward me. I jumped into the water. I swam to shore without looking back. My boat was found overturned miles away the next morning. They never found my fishing gear. In southern Brazil, in the states of Paraná, Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul, where the gaucho culture predominates, La Llorona appears in the fields and abandoned ranches. The gauchos say that on foggy nights, when all is silent, her weeping can be heard traveling across the fields. And they say that if you see her, you are cursed. Because it means you have been chosen. And she will return for you. The legend doesn't belong only to the past. It's not a story grandmothers tell to scare children. The testimonies continue. In the 21st century, with smartphones and cameras in every pocket, people still report encounters with La Llorona. The case of Monterrey, Mexico, 2015. In April 2015, a group of young people from Monterrey decided to investigate reports of crying coming from the Santa Catarina River. For weeks, residents of the area had reported hearing a woman crying near the river, especially between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. The young people, equipped with cameras and recorders, spent 3 consecutive nights at the location. The first 2 nights recorded nothing unusual. But the third night was different. One of them, Miguel, shared his testimony on an internet forum. It was 2:47 a.m. when we heard it. At first, it was very far away. We thought it was the wind. But it got closer. It was clearly a woman crying. We all went silent. The cameras were recording. Then we saw something moving among the trees. A white figure. It was moving strangely, like it was floating. One of us shone a powerful flashlight toward it. And we saw it clearly. It was a woman in a white dress. Her hair covered her face. And she was about 2 meters off the ground, floating. We all screamed. We ran to the cars. When we reviewed the recordings, you can hear the crying perfectly in the audio. But in the video, you can't see anything in the video. You can only hear us screaming. But there was something there. We all saw it. The audio recordings were analyzed by sound experts. They were unable to determine the source of the crying or explain why the cameras didn't capture anything visual. The Guayaquil incident, Ecuador, 2018. In October 2018, several security guards at Malecon 2000 in Guayaquil reported similar encounters over the same 3-week period. The first report came from a security guard monitoring the cameras. He saw a woman walking along the boardwalk at 3:15 a.m. The strange thing was that the other cameras didn't capture her. Only one did. When he changed the angle, she disappeared. The second week, another guard saw her in person. He decided to approach her and ask her to leave the area. When he was a few feet away, she turned away. The guard described her face as incomplete. It was like someone had drawn a face but hadn't finished it, he said. The third week, 3 guards saw her simultaneously. She was standing on the edge of the seawall, looking out at the river. As they approached, she dropped into the water. The 3 of them ran to the edge, expecting to see her fall. But there was nothing. No splash. No sound. Just the river flowing normally. The security camera footage from that night was reviewed. It shows the 3 guards running toward the edge. But it doesn't show any woman before that. However, the audio clearly captures crying just before the guards run. The boardwalk increased security and prohibited access to that section after 2 a.m. The viral video from Colombia, 2020. During the COVID-19 quarantine, a video recorded in Cali, Colombia, went viral on social media. It showed a white figure floating above an empty park at 4 a.m. The video was recorded by a security camera on a nearby building. The figure appears on the left edge of the frame, moves slowly toward the center, stops, and then gradually disappears, as if dissolving into thin air. Thousands of people dismissed it as a hoax. But several residents of the area confirmed that during those weeks of quarantine, when the cities were completely silent, they heard crying every night. Crying that couldn't have come from any apartment, because it was clearly audible from outside, from the park. A woman who lived across from the park stated, "I saw her too. Not just in the video. I saw her from my window. 3 times. Always around 4 in the morning. I couldn't sleep because of the lockdown. I'd look out the window and there she was. A woman in white walking through the empty park. But she walked strangely. As if she wasn't touching the ground. And she was crying. That crying chilled me to the bone. It was a cry of total loss. Of someone who has nothing left to lose." After so many testimonies, so many encounters across centuries and continents, the questions remain. Is it the same entity that travels throughout Latin America? Or are they multiple spirits trapped in similar tragedies? Is it an archetype, a collective memory of maternal pain taking shape? Or is it something older, more primal? Paranormal researchers have proposed numerous theories. Some speak of haunted places, sites where intense tragedies leave an energetic imprint that repeats itself like a broken record. Others mention tulpas, or thought forms, entities created and fueled by collective belief. But no theory explains why so many people, in such distant places, separated by centuries, describe exactly the same thing: the white dress, the long hair, the unmistakable crying, the presence by the water. Anthropologists point out that the figure of the mother weeping for her lost children is universal. It exists in all cultures, in all eras. La Llorona is the Latin American manifestation of this archetype. But those who have seen her, those who have heard her, those who have felt her presence, know that she is more than a symbol. She is real, tangible, terrifyingly present. Today, somewhere in Latin America, someone will hear the crying. Perhaps he's a fisherman setting out before dawn. Perhaps he's a driver taking a shortcut along a lonely road. Perhaps he's someone who, for no apparent reason, wakes up at 3 in the morning and stares out the window. And it will be there. The woman in white, floating, crying, looking for something she lost so long ago that no one remembers exactly when. Some say La Llorona is guilt personified. The weight of an unforgivable mistake that becomes an eternal curse. Others say she is a warning: take care of your children, protect what you love, because you can lose it in an instant. And there are those who say it is simply pain. Pure pain, so intense that it transcends death, so deep that it refuses to fade away. Mothers throughout Latin America still use her name to warn children: don't go out at night or La Llorona will get you. Grandparents tell her stories around the fire. Young people record videos trying to find her. And the skeptics laugh, until they hear her. Because in the end, La Llorona doesn't need you to believe in her. She's just there. Expecting. Crying. Searching. Tonight, when the world is asleep and the silence is absolute, listen closely. Perhaps you will hear something in the distance. A soft cry coming from the wind, from the water, from the darkness. And if you listen to it, remember this. Don't answer if he calls you by your name. Don't look her directly in the eyes. And above all, stay away from the water.